Hi, my name's Helen Lochhead, and it's great to be here. I'm delighted to be at the GSD with such an extraordinary group of people that I've met over the last few weeks. As you know, I'm from Sydney, and although I spent several years working in New York after I finished my studies at Columbia University, I've spent most of my career in Australia. More than 85% of Australians live on the coastline, so it follows that I've spent most of my professional life working in harbour cities and coastal towns around Australia. But most of my life I've been working in Sydney. Sydney is a harbour city of 5 million people that hugs a 320-kilometre coastline. I'm sorry I haven't translated these into miles and acres yet, but I'll do that before the year is out. Sydney Harbour is not only a breathtaking waterway, the shoreline is ringed with the city's most valued landscapes, national parks, cultural assets such as the Sydney Opera House, infrastructure and development. But like all post-industrial cities, Sydney has its share of degraded industrial sites and buildings that are ripe for redevelopment. With derelict structures such as this redundant coal-fired power station at White Bay, which I've been working on, waiting for a viable new lease of life. Inevitably, these waterfront sites have significant challenges, ageing infrastructure and environmental issues. So this includes low-lying flood-prone land, often contaminated landfill, and acid sulfate soils. So you can see that the potential of this is completely coupled with the challenge of how you overcome these difficulties. Interestingly, over 20 years, I've shaped more major sites around Sydney Harbour than most and have a deep understanding of this unique place, its attributes, its issues, and its challenges. In the wake of major storm events such as Sandy, Katrina, and tsunamis around the world, the long-term viability of our harbour cities and coastal settlements has really come into focus. The sea level rise in our region is predicted to be up to 0.5 metre by 2050 and more than 1 metre by 2100. Our coast is equally vulnerable to the effects of climate change from more frequent storms, exacerbating inundation, flooding, erosion and seawater impacts. There are many challenges, and here are a few I've been grappling with. Uncertainty in sea level rise projections and storm events, mitigation of extreme storms, protection of our vulnerable assets, including our cultural icons, reconfiguration of the shorelines and open spaces, management and enhancement of foreshore ecosystems, retrofitting and adaptation, and designing new types of adaptable buildings and structures. But of course, there's also governance issues like silo-based institutions and problem solving that lack coordination and inhibit climate-responsive approaches, and short-term crisis management as opposed to proactive long-term planning and preparedness. In total, there's a lack of strategic leadership and coordination across agencies, and this really hinders integrated outcomes. All these are issues I face in my working life. For this reason, I'm interested in exploring new ways to plan, design and reconfigure our urban waterfronts to better prepare and adapt them for our changing climate. Using Sydney Harbour as a case study and drawing lessons from other cities, I'd like to research current design thinking and innovative strategies for cities to adapt to both slow and fast calamities, such as sea level rise and record storm events. So what is the opportunity? Creating a vision and delivering a strategic agenda is only possible by co-creating with others. For this reason, taking time out to explore diverse strategies that can be realised by many players is where I see potential. Developing compelling propositions that address the impact of climate change and deliver co-benefits is crucial. I believe the key is identifying strategies that recognise and enhance the place as a whole, in contrast to our current siloed governance, fragmented policies, and project-based approaches. This poses both challenges and, for me, exciting possibilities for the reshaping of our city. But who am I, and how did I get to be where I am today? I'm an architect, urban and landscape designer, and an adjunct professor at Sydney University, and most recently I've been the Executive Director of Place Development for Sydney Harbour Foreshore Authority. For many years now, I've worked across disciplines and in integrated practices in both the private and public sectors, including the City of Sydney and the Government Architect's Office. Even in my private practice, I've always worked on public projects where I feel I can make the most difference. Some complex, such as urban regeneration of brownfield sites, some small and discrete, like urban spaces and small public buildings. But always I've approached my work through multiple lenses. As such, in the work I've been doing, I'm very aware of the critical need to develop inventive ways to adapt and build in resilience in our work. I'm mindful that working in the public realm, I have the opportunity to leverage projects I lead to innovate and make a difference at a much broader scale. My work, while focused on the public realm, falls into 3 categories, each interrelated. And I'd like to talk about each of these in turn. The first is the role of an initiator, provocateur, and facilitator, where I have worked to influence on a broader scale through hypothetical projects, studio teaching, charrettes and workshops, and demonstration projects, all to promote discourse. These are often promoted through publications, such as Sydney Spaces, a project I developed for 35 blue sky projects that enlisted proposals for the city's streets, squares and parks in the lead up to the 2000 Olympics and led to the city's largest public improvement program since the bicentennial. An ESD book, and it's not the same ESD as Arena's, this is Ecological Sustainable Development, a book of case studies from the Government Architect's Office exemplifying the 3 E's and lessons learnt. And most recently, Design Parramatta, New Ideas to Shape Sydney's Second City. This is Chifley Square, a concept I developed with 2 colleagues for the Sydney Spaces project that was later built. Government, as a builder of urban environments, can lead by example to promote sustainability, and often we have the mandate to drive it by fostering teams of engineers, architects, urban and landscape designers working together to create more sustainable projects. And these we profiled in the ESD book. This is Victoria Park in Sydney, an old derelict racecourse. I actually have a specialty in racecourses, as it turns out, which was redeveloped for a new urban neighbourhood. The urban layout of this flood-prone site was driven by water management and flow. All stormwater is filtered and detained and reused within the public domain. And you can see we even designed proprietary leaky gutters, so all the road water runoff from the road goes into the swale in the centre line. And this is a nationally award-winning project. For Sydney's second city, Parramatta, we worked with Council to instigate an international call to designers that yielded Design Parramatta, a compendium of new ideas for the city, which was based on my Sydney Spaces project. Our design team proposed a larger strategy to address water management and heat island impacts, as well as enhance the recreation experience. The next category of work I'd like to talk about is strategic planning at a broader scale. Creating a vision, structuring development, and laying out the public domain to achieve integrated outcomes that equal more than the sum of the parts. The Sydney Olympic Park is 400 hectares of remediated landfill and very similar in nature and background to Fresh Kills. It was designed for an 11-day event, and our challenge post-Olympics was to retrofit and revitalise the site for the future. So here is the Olympic site, and you can see it has at least 230 hectares of parkland surrounding it, built on remediated landfill and extensive wetlands as well. We developed new development guidelines and new parks and structures that enhanced and protected the fragile ecologies and water system, such as the Newington Armoury and Brick Pit Ring projects. This was an old armaments depot where we tried to reinstate the natural systems while adapting and reusing the existing army buildings for community purposes and studios. And here is this extraordinary project, the Brick Pit Ring project, which was designed eventually by Durbach Block. The interpretation and connection had to be elevated out of the water reservoir and now has created an interpretive walk which which allows you to understand the history and ecology of the place and reconnects it with the surrounding parkland. Quite an amazing experience. The post-Olympic master plan is transforming this major events precinct into a 24/7 mixed-use community with higher environmental credentials than were achieved during the 2000 Games through very tough bargaining with our board. At Harold Park, as you can see, another raceway, we worked with the city and the landowners to replace a redundant racetrack with a new high-density neighbourhood now under construction. With over 1,000 new dwellings, including 25% affordable housing, the project maintains 35% open space, improves the hydrology and biodiversity of this flood-prone land, and also achieves high environmental targets. And lastly, I want to talk about strategic projects, where we have the capacity to work at different scales and implement initiatives that will be delivered over time by different players. My most recent work was at Circular Quay. Circular Quay is the birthplace of Sydney and framed by Sydney's iconic Harbour Bridge and Sydney Opera House. But it has many issues: stressed and aged infrastructure, development pressures, siloed decision-making, of course, and last but not least, sea level rise and its consequent impacts. However, the opportunity is extraordinary because of the and there's a huge number of projects planned or in the pipeline in this precinct, as you can see. But the opportunity for me was extraordinary because of the consolidated land ownership in the precinct, with all those blue areas in government ownership of one agency or another. So working together, we can actually do something much bigger than the sum of the parts. The Circular Quay Master Plan is a 30-year strategy for a staged transformation of Sydney Cove. The Master Plan reconnects the city with the harbour and proposes a greener quay by removing the elevated expressway, undergrounding the rail, and recapturing 30% more open space for pedestrians along a new waterfront promenade designed to accommodate the projected sea level rise and storm surge. The plan is designed to be implemented over time with projects by both public and private sector. We have already completed a piece of the waterfront at West Circular Quay in front of the new Museum of Contemporary Art, which is shown here. While at Walsh Bay, a new cultural precinct will transform the wharves and reconnect the quay to Darling Harbour. So this is much more of an adaptive reuse project. So, ultimately, what would I like to accomplish this year? I recognise the value of working within government to effect changes beyond the project scale. However, I also realise the limitations. Developing a broader perspective this year will not only better equip me for my current and future challenges, but also better position me to transition into new roles where I can facilitate more integrated approaches to the design and management of our coastal settlements. I'd like to return to my professional life with an enhanced skill set. Besides refined critical thinking and a substantial research base, I'd like to really have under my belt new approaches to a resilience planning that maximise co-benefits and the ability to translate these into action. I'd like to work on my enhanced leadership capabilities to effect change and, of course, develop new networks, both academic and professional. If I could do some of these, they would be great achievements. In any event, the Loeb Fellowship is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I'm very keen to be here to embrace it. Thank you.